Hello everyone. I'm going to try to give a brief overview of the lesson plan assignment that begins this week. And I'm going to start with this PowerPoint presentation. Let's talk about the 6 components of the lesson plan. This is going to be a little different than what you would normally submit to the edTPA. We're only going to do one lesson. Typically at the edTPA we'll require 3 to 5 lessons. My recommendation is for you to only do 3. I think if you do more you're only going to get in trouble. You're only supposed to submit no more than 4 pages. I don't know how you can do that with 5 lessons, but I think excuse me, I think each lesson has to be no more than 4 pages. So please don't make this lesson more than 4 pages. The next thing you need to look at is a pre and post assessment. The pre-assessment is supposed to be for the whole unit, but for this assignment, you're going to create a pre-assessment and a post-assessment just for this lesson plan, which isn't a bad idea. If you go into course materials and look at the kindergarten lesson plan, you'll see that this person starts out with their pre-assessment, formal pre-assessment. So I would use this as a guide, but you're going to have to add some things to this because you are not going to do a commentary. So when we talk about supporting your strategies and your assessments and with research, you're going to have to put a citation here and then add a reference list at the end. Now this exemplar lesson plan doesn't have that, of course, so you're going to have to do that, and I'll point out where those should be as we go through this presentation. So you begin with a pre-assessment, and part of that pre-assessment should be assessing what we call a context of learning. The context of learning are the cultural and community assets and where your students are coming from and how you're going to use that information to plan your lesson. And so those things are important that you include them. Now, if you don't include them, you still can pass the edTPA. But I'm trying to get all of you to get at least a 4, which for our rubrics is an A. A 5 is an A+, very similar to our discussion board rubric. And the point values will be the same as the discussion board rubric. I don't have them on the rubric right now. I will add them during the week so you'll know exactly what you will get for each level. So you're going to start off with a pre-assessment. You're going to have a post-assessment, and there are 2 kinds of assessment we're going to talk about: informal and formal assessments. Now, informal are questions posed by the teacher, observations of students as they work, and all these should be included in your lesson plan when you talk about how you're going to plan for students that may not get it the first time, and we'll talk about that a little later. So, in any type of prompt presented by the teacher. And now formative assessments could be a thumbs up, thumbs down, fist to 5. Red light, green light, yellow light cards. Those are all ways that, and even whiteboards, small whiteboards where you can do computations and show answers. Those are all informal formative assessments that you need to build into your lesson plan. Formal assessments can be summative or formative. Your pre and post assessment should be summative assessments, but your formative assessments can be exit tickets. Those are formal assessments, or any kind of quiz that you allow students to do-overs, discuss ones they got wrong, quizzes, journal entries, etc. So those are types of assessments that you need to build into your lesson plan. Learning targets, I want to see student-friendly learning targets, and I'm going to go to talk about they should be specific, measurable, and student-friendly. Now, student-friendly means you either put a we in front of it, we will be able to, I will be able to. So those are student-friendly because you are going to create activities where students reflect on those learning targets, where they discuss them, where they repeat them back to you, so they know exactly where they're going. And that's a big part of the assessment process. Where am I going? Where am I now? How can I close the gap? So that should be built into your plan. And there are typically they contain an action verb, like describe. Avoid using words like understand, appreciate. Those are way too general. You need to use action verbs, and I will have a list of those action verbs in course materials. And words like define, words like compare and contrast, explain, describe, those are all action verbs. And you can see that there are 4 types of learning targets. Knowledge, those are the ones that most of you will create assessments for because they're easy. You know, how many, which one, what's the answer. Reasoning are a little different. Many of you created reasoning targets for the quiz that the quiz discussion board that we just did, and I was pretty excited about that because in my assessment course, students struggle with those things, and you folks picked it up pretty quickly, so I was impressed by that. There are also products learning target and skill learning targets, and you can see I have examples here. I can convert simple fractions to yada yada. You should build in a learning target activity in the beginning, middle, and end of your assignment of your lesson. So students are internalizing it at the beginning, they're reviewing it in the middle, and at the end they're reflecting on how they did. So that's something that I think is very important, and you don't hear many people talk about in creating lesson plans. And I have in course materials, and I hope I have my in course materials I have in additional resources, and it helped if I was logged on. In additional resources, under lesson plan resources, I have videos, and this video on SWABOT, making learning targets clear, it's a very good example of how you can build in a learning target activity to start your lesson so students know exactly where they're going. So I would recommend that highly. Okay, so we've got one lesson, pre and post assessments, your state standards, and central focus. I didn't mention that you need to include the number and text of each standard that is being addressed. There is in course materials, there is a, let me go into coursework by week. I believe I've placed the Common Core State Standards, but you're going to have to scroll down. If you, here they are, New York State Common Core Standards. You're going to have to scroll way down to get to where you need to. These are kindergartens, and this is how you're going to list them: KMD.1, KMD.2. That's kindergarten. Now, when you get here's grade 1, you'll see that it's 1 OA, Operations in Algebraic Thinking, .1. So let's go back and look at the sample lesson plan. You'll see CCS, this is a kindergarten standard, NBTA1, and NBT B2. So that's a first grade standard, and this is a kindergarten standard. So from that standard, you're going to create a central focus, which is a big idea, and I don't think I mentioned that yet. Let me see. After your learning targets, you're going to do instructional strategies, learning tasks. I did mention, maybe I didn't mention central focus, but and if you did any work, if anybody's ever talked to you about Wiggins and McTighe backward design lesson planning, you always start with a general understanding or an enduring question, or an enduring understanding or an essential question. And it's a big idea. So your central focus is a big idea. It's something that you probably aren't going to accomplish in 1 or 2 lessons. Could take you all year, could take you a couple of years. So it's a big idea. So that's what, when they talk about central focus, that's what they're looking for. And if you look in that lesson plan, you'll see the central focus to help students gain familiarity with the quantities and their names. So that's a big idea. That's not going to take place in just 1 or 2 assignments. That's something that will probably those teachers will work on all year. And you can see there's the learning target. That's not a student-friendly one. Students will associate quantities with the printed symbols representing them. But associate is an action verb. So that would be your learning target. And academic language, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm not sure if I have it in here. We're going to talk. The last part of your naturally you're going to have instructional strategies, including what you and the students will be doing. Now I added 2 types of lesson plans in course materials. One has 2 columns, like the exemplar that I used. You notice this has 2 columns when it talks about instruction and inquiry, assessment, what the teacher's doing and what you will be doing. So I have that format, and I also have one with just 1 column, so where you're going to answer the writing prompts. But so that's the last thing that you're going to do is, after your instructional strategies, you're going to do practice or support activities, instructional resources, and materials that are used to engage students in learning. So in those strategies and supports, you're going to have to talk about planned supports. This is a big idea, and it's one of the rubrics. And when we get into the rubrics, you'll see that in your lesson plan, you're going to have to talk about how you're going to take care of students that don't get it right away, or how you're going to take care of students with IEPs, 504 plans, response to intervention. So those planned supports have to be in your lesson plan, because that's part of the rubric. Okay, I'm going to skip this part, and I'm going to get right into the rubrics. Rubric 1, and I believe I have that open. Rubric 1, in order to get a 4, your plan has to build on each other. That you don't have to worry about that. So what it has to do, though, is to support learning of facts and procedures with clear and consistent connections to concepts and to mathematical reasons or problem solving. So notice that "and" in there. So to get a level 4, you have to do both, the top and the bottom. And then there's an "or," reasoning or problem solving. So you need to have mathematical reasoning in your lesson plan, or problem solving skills, activities that are going to do that. All right, let's talk about rubric number 2. Here's the plan supports with learning objectives. Supports address the needs of specific individuals or groups with similar needs, and the supports include specific strategies to identify and respond to preconceptions, common errors, and misconceptions or misunderstandings. So you have to build that into your lesson plan. How am I going to ferret out those misconceptions, those preconceptions? And that usually comes about through a good pre-test or a good pre-assessment. That's how you ferret that stuff out. Rubric 3, it's using knowledge of students to inform teaching and learning, and this is when I mentioned the context of learning. You need to talk about why you need to justify your learning tests if they're appropriate, using examples of students' prior academic learning, and that's something you're going to have to make up or talk about that you're going to assess in your pre-assessment. And then personal, cultural, community assets, and from that, making connections to research and or theory. Now, that's normally done in the commentary section, but in your lesson plan, you're going to, as you talk about how you're going to do that, or what strategy you're going to use, like if you're using plan support, you're going to differentiate instruction, you're going to use stations, you're going to use small groups. You're going to cite research that says, where did you get that from? Okay, Carol Ann Tomlinson, cooperative learning from Slavin or Johnson & Johnson. So as you're going through this, as you use a strategy, put a citation in this part right here, what the teacher does, and tell where that come from. So at the end, so this lesson plan ends right here. So at the end, you're going to put a reference list. So your reference list will go right here. This is lesson 2, and you're not going to lead 2 lessons. So your reference list will go right at the end. Rubric 4, identifying and supporting language demands. You're going to have to talk about language. What are the language supports? You're going to have to address the use of vocabulary and or symbols, language function. The language function is your verb in your learning objectives: describe, list, compute, compare and contrast. Whatever action verb, that is your language function. And you have to address one or more additional language demands: discourse, syntax, how you're going to talk to your students, how they're going to communicate to you what they know, and then you build in language supports are designed to meet the needs of students with different levels of language learning. So that's rubric 4. Rubric 5 is your planning assessments and monitoring and support student learning. So throughout your lesson, and if you look at this, one thing I like about this exemplar lesson, and one of the things I like, is that you'll notice that they have a review, instruction, inquiry to start off with. Then they have informal assessment. So after you instruct, after they practice, you have informal assessment. Then you do practice again with support. This is where you're going to talk about breaking kids up into your small groups. And then you're going to do a closure assessment. So what's important is that you're not just going to teach your lesson and then assess it. You're going to teach your lesson, and you're going to talk about supporting your students that don't get it. And how do you know if they don't get it? Well, you do by using informal assessment or formative assessment before you go on and do more practice activities. And then you're going to have closure. This is a good sample, but you're going to have to add things to it to make it fit our rubric. So your lesson plan sequence is going to be like this: pre-assessment, your state standards, your central focus, your learning targets that are student friendly. You're going to do instruction, inquiry, review, preview, formative assessment, more practice and activity support, more formative assessment, practice and activity support, closure, assessment of student voice. Now, what is assessment of student voice? That is when we talked about learning target activities. At the end, you're going to have students talk about, reflect on, or do some kind of activity around the learning target. How did they internalize it? How did they feel they did learning it? So that's going to be your closure, and that's the student voice that we're talking about. And then you'll do some kind of formal assessment. Normally that would be done after the sequence of lesson plans, but we're going to do it after only one. So you're going to do a formal assessment and then just build that in, what you're going to do to assess what students know. I want to talk about the assignment sequence and how it's going to work for us. Your first draft of your lesson plan will be uploaded in this discussion board session 7 discussion board, and you're going to do it to your group, your current group, discussion board group. And that's going to be doing, and you're going to give feedback to 5 of your group mates on how to improve that plan. So this is a 2-week, again, it's a 2-week discussion board. You upload your lesson plan, and I want you to upload it in 2 ways this time. I want you to attach it as a Word document, and I want you to cut and paste it so your classmates can just read it on the discussion board. I'm going to download it and make comments right on it. So I will want a document to do that with, and then I'll put that document right in the discussion board so other people can read it as well. So you're going to give feedback to 5 of your group mates, or you can do 9 of them if you want to get an A+, but I'm only looking for you to give feedback to 5 of your group mates. I will also provide you with feedback, and your second draft is going to be uploaded to a second discussion board with different group members. And I will publish these. I'll publish the groups when I make that discussion board available. So that's it. That's what the assignment is going to consist of, and this is what I call assessment for learning, because you're going to do the assessment, you're going to get feedback from me and from your classmates, you're going to revise that assessment, you're going to upload it again to another discussion board and get more feedback from a different group of your classmates, and then you're going to upload it to me for grading and safe assign checking. So please don't plagiarize anything, because it will be checked by safe assign at the end. I'm not going to do it until the end, so just know that that's going to happen. So that's it, and good luck, and I look forward to reading your lesson plans.